Hi, this is Mike, and my wife and I, Debbie Schramer, wrote the book Fairy Village, and I'm going to read you the introduction today, but right now I want to show you some of the village. I thought it'd be nice to show you some of the village that was in the book, and of course there were other things, but this is just all we have on this table right here that we had on display in our shop when it was open. So you'll get to know these dwellings and what purpose they have and the people who live there and what kind of occupation and work they do. So let's get started. Hi, welcome back. This is Mike Schramer, and with my wife Debbie, we wrote and created all the artwork for this book, Fairy Village. And we finished it in April of 2017, and it was published by Familius later that year. I'll show you the inside cover. I'm going to read the introduction to you today. It was made like a photo journal, so the story goes that we were on a hike and we became across a village that we were able to photograph and do sketches of and paintings of, and we brought back what we saw. So I'll show you that beginning now. This is the 4-page fold out that's just inside the cover. You see it folds out and shows everything we've created for the story. There's the school and the elf library and all these buildings. We go into detail: the fairy dress shop, the lamplighter's house, the sewing room. So this is in the book. It folds out in 4 pages. It shows everything that you find in the book. There's the word Fairy Village. There's the clock shop and some of the toy shop and etc. So now I'll read to you the introduction. I forgot, there's one more page inside with all the information on the publishing and some paintings, and then it gets right into it after that. No, there's another page, a lead-in page about the postcards and stories and contents, table of contents, and then it begins. Here's the introduction page with a dragonfly and a little fairy holding a butterfly and a bird. It says, "How curious the butterflies and birds seem friendly here and not afraid." So here's the introduction and how it starts. In which 2 humans were invited to tour the fairy world. Imagine, if you will, an extraordinary encounter with an amazing fairy world. A fairy village tucked deep in the most awe-inspiring forest of giant trees and ferns. Moss and pine needles carpet the forest floor. Lovely shadows hiding a fascinating unseen world lit by shafts of light revealing a mysterious curiosity. It all began one day on a hike we had planned for quite some time, to sketch and photograph a forest we had visited, but whose more arduous trail we had not yet ventured on. Our packs were filled with a camera, sketchbooks, binoculars, and sandwiches. It was a perfect April afternoon with gentle breezes and a welcoming bit of warmth. As we walked along the moss-laden path, our conversations turned to the beauty of the forest. We pointed out delicate leaves and lovely shafts of sunlight coming through the tall trees. The lush vegetation, the beautiful skies, and billowing clouds were so inspiring and lovely to us. We could feel our spirits coming calmer and remarked how happy we felt in this beautiful, peaceful place, wishing it could be our home. We were well on our way beyond the voices of other humans when we began to hear the sounds of birds off the trail in the distance. Their songs were beautiful, but somehow curious. When we came upon them, they were not frightened, nor did they fly away. They began chirping, which by now sounded like a conversation. It was such a spectacle that we pulled out our camera to photograph them. The elf. His clothes were beautifully stitched and incredibly delicate. The birds were seeming to make an effort to get our attention. We offered them bits of bread, but they showed little interest. We were curious as to the source of their exuberance, but then we realized the birds were trying to tell us something. We decided to follow them as they flew into a small hill beyond where we stood. As we reached the top of the hill, we found to our surprise the loveliest patch of flowers growing in circles and shafts of sunlight in what otherwise would have been a shaded forest. We photographed the colorful flowers as they were unlike any we had ever seen. Freeing our attention from the curious flowers, we noticed the birds had flown away from us again, and this time towards a large patch of sunlight above a beautifully moss-laden meadow. We reached the meadow and found that for the first time the birds had stopped their chattering and had perched themselves quietly in a tree above us. It was as if they wanted us to notice something. We were still musing at this odd turn of events, but we decided to rest on the soft, mossy ground when we noticed the most amazing sight right near our feet. There, under a beautiful fern, sat a tiny cart no bigger than the size of a child's hand. The little cart was made of twigs and moss with tall sides, a long handle, and a curious tiny wheels. Inside were little tools, crates, and cloth pouches all snugly fit and tied with rope. We were so astonished that we were not sure what to think. Who would have left this tiny cart here, so unprotected in the forest, though shaded by a large thick fern? Had someone made the cart and left it as a gift, or were they using it on a journey somewhere? Or did someone really make this little cart? We did not know, and our questions seemed unanswerable. The birds sat quietly above us in the trees in a curious silence, as if they knew something was about to happen. Suddenly, we heard a tiny voice coming from the direction of the little cart. We turned to discover the most astonishing sight we had ever witnessed. It was a tiny person, a man, just a little taller than the mysterious cart. He seemed to be speaking to us. His voice was so small, we leaned closer and could see that, as I said, we leaned closer to see what he had said, and found out he was an elf. We almost thought we were dreaming until he began to talk to us, explaining he had left the little cart for us to see. "Why did you want us to find the cart?" we asked. "We've always thought that the elves didn't want to be found." The little man smiled and remarked, "Every elf is given one chance in his lifetime to meet someone from the human world and share something about the forest with them. The birds told me you were friends of the forest, so I wanted to meet you. I set my little cart out under the fern to see what you would do." We were so amazed we weren't sure quite what to say to the little man. He told us that we had shown great concern for his cart, which he was gladdened by, and he felt assured he could speak to us. Our conversations continued as we learned more about the little elf's life in the forest. He told us about the village where he and his forest friends lived, and then he introduced us to his wife, a kind little fairy who was traveling with him on a special journey. They had been sent out to the outer boundaries of the fairy village to find new land for a new village to be built. He couldn't take us to meet any of the other elves and fairies, but he could show us a place where we could view the village from a distance, make some sketches and photographs and goings-on with our camera. The elf and his fairy wife explained that we mustn't walk into the fairy village, as it would disappear and blend into the trees itself. He hoped that we would document his world with care through our drawings and photographs, and share them with others so they would know to be gentle with the forest and those who live there. Our conversations lasted well into the afternoon. Then we sadly said our goodbyes. We watched the little couple disappear quietly down the path, pulling their cart behind them. As we stood listening to the gentle breeze, we were astonished at what we had just experienced, but were filled with a wonderful feeling of gratitude. The little couple had shared with us something very special about their world, and we were excited to learn more. The following stories and photographs, journal memories and sketches, are what we have brought back with us from that day to share with you. We hope you will delight in the gentleness of these little folk and their enchanted little world. Mike and Debbie. And that's the introduction to Fairy Village. The next chapter is called The Village Market, and in it we begin to find some of the vendors that live in the village and sell and share their goods and live together. See you next time.